Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge, where we are looking at the life of a person one moment at a time rather than a movie a minute at a time. We shifted gears in this third season, as those of you who have been loyal listeners already know, but some of you first-time listeners, we encourage you to go back and check out seasons 1 and 2, where we broke down the movie Young Frankenstein in season 1 and then Blazing Saddles in season 2, but we shifted to a more talk show format here in season 3. And as you heard from the open, I am your host, Alan Sanders, and I am joined by my good buddy, Walt Murray. Walt, how you doing, man?
I am doing great. It is Thanksgiving week, so I'm ready to pound down about 500,000 calories and have the illusion that it's healthy.
So by the time this actually airs, you may actually be in cardiac arrest.
Good chance. Good chance. Either that or having a liposuction.
Yeah, with a fire hose.
No, this year I have really, I'm not going to do that to myself. In fact, with all the crazy stuff going on, the governor of Georgia used the magic word, please. And we said, okay, as long as he's not demanding we do anything, then we will be smart. But, my in-laws and my dad and his wife are both, 70s, 80s, health issues, things like that. So we're doing Thanksgiving at home, and hopefully I can be a little bit more disciplined than I normally am.
I have made the same mistake the last couple of Thanksgivings where I feel like I haven't pushed it, and then I go to stand up and I can't stand straight because it hurts too much. I have to lean over.
Well, I don't know how it is at your family's gatherings, but at both families, everybody thinks that they need to bring a dessert. So there'll be like 16 different desserts, and it would really kind of be blasphemous just to leave the dessert uneaten. So I've got to try every one of them. Don't want anybody to feel bad about what they brought. So I'm going to do my best this year to have one small one and actually act like I'm taking care of myself.
Well, one of the things that kills me this time of year is I hadn't realized until several years back when it came to desserts. I just thought, well, I like desserts, but I am a pie person. Cakes, there's a couple of cakes. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll have a slice of cake. But at the same time, let's say there's a bunch of kids and I don't see there's a whole lot of cake. I'm like, yeah, the kids can have it. When it comes to pie, I just realized there is not a pie I won't eat.
Well, I can relate. I'm not a big cake person. In fact, I don't really, cake's just not my thing. But yeah, you put a good pecan pie or whatever in front of me, and it's bad news.
Dude, my mom makes a mincemeat pie. It's like a dinner pie. And I'm like, 2 servings, give it to me. That's dinner and it's like the meal and dessert.
So you're basically, if it's in a pie pan,
if it's in a pie crust,
it's a pie.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know that really fits the definition, but
I don't know if you've ever had mincemeat, but I'm telling you, man.
No, I have. It's good stuff. Well, it's like a chicken pot pie. You can't.
Yeah.
Can't really.
There you go. There's another pie.
Turn that down.
I'm a big pie guy.
So what's your traditional stuff around Thanksgiving?
Okay, since we just had it, for everybody who's listening in the past,
it's the holidays.
Always turkey at Thanksgiving. We've always got to have a turkey there. We've been smoking ours the last couple of years, which is a little more time consuming and a little more difficult. But everybody just goes crazy over the meat. You have to brine it for about 24 hours, which basically means get a large bag, and it's like a salt, sugar, water solution. You put the turkey in and just let it soak for a day and a half. And then you put it on the smoker for about another 12 hours, and so good. But then there's we do stuffing because we're from up north, but we also don't mind dressing. We've got cranberry sauce. We've got to do the sweet potato souffle, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. My sister-in-law usually does a corn casserole. Then there's probably a salad my mom will make of some kind, usually a 7-layer salad. there's always a Jello mold of some kind because my mom was raised in that era where people still make Jello molds. Like nobody eats this anymore, but yeah, they do. So okay, so we have that, and then for dessert, it's like you said, we have probably 7 or 8 pies, cakes, and other fudge things like that are always around the table.
Well, I stopped eating those Jello mold things after Christmas vacation. And
your package is leaking.
and it had cat food in it, and it got my suspicions up about what's in there. But yeah, pretty much anything else has been fair game. So, but I'm gonna try to be good this year. But hey, thanks to your Saturday morning show, I now know the difference between stuffing and dressing.
Oh, it's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and the biggest difference is that stuffing gets stuffed inside the bird. And that's why it's called stuffing.
Well, there's also another thing. Usually stuffing is a more bread-based version, whereas a dressing is more like a cornmeal based.
Right, which makes sense. So,
and I like them both, by the way. They're and gravy. Gotta have gravy. All over everything because absolutely. Nothing like slathering liquid fat over everything that you're already eating 5,000 calories. Why not make it 6?
Oh, of course. Well, and then you got to have cranberries to get your healthy berry intake.
It makes you feel like you've got something healthy on the plate.
Yes, but you can't have it like from the can.
No. We do. I grew up with it. You've got the little rings you just like you pop it out sideways and it's kind of sitting there, and then you know exactly where to slice each one because of the little concentric rings around the outside.
Yeah, well, that reminds me too much of like the 5th grade cafeteria.
I always liked the cafeteria food when I was a kid, and they always did it up for Thanksgiving. I always liked it.
Yeah. Now, do you all sit down as a family and watch football, or do you go out and play football or anything like that?
No, we don't play football. We usually, because now everybody's grown up, what ends up happening is everybody makes the side dishes that my mom has doled out to us. And then we all show up, and then we spend probably an hour just chatting. There may be a football game on, but we're all kind of just visiting and chatting. The kids are just playing around, and then time to eat, and we all just gather around. My mom sets up 2 or 3 tables end to end so we can just sit like we're in a sort of a mini church hall, and we just all eat.
Yeah, we used to really get into watching football every Thanksgiving, but then all the kids showed up and all that kind of stuff, and you have a billion distractions. And so, we haven't been as much the last few years unless the Falcons are playing. And then you watch until they're so far behind that they can't possibly win, which is usually the end of the first quarter.
Much like your turkey, you watch until they're done.
Until they're done. Yep. You got it. So
side note, because I know we've been talking a lot about food because it's been a Thanksgiving week by the time this airs, but I've been working on my wife's craft room. We talked about that a couple episodes back, and you accused me of making myself look competent to my wife, which is why she assigns me all these tasks.
Right.
So I found a way to make myself look incompetent. You want to hear it?
I do. You're probably following one of my examples, but yes, I definitely want to hear it.
It usually means hurting myself, which I seem to have a knack for.
This should be good.
So my wife decided, because we've got all this ductwork kind of hanging in the downstairs area, rather than try to figure out how to put a real low hanging ceiling or anything, we decided we run some guy wire from one edge of the room to the other and then drape some burlap. So it kind of like makes sort of wave looks. You'd have to see it, but it looks really cool. But you have to like stretch the wire really tight, and you put a turnbuckle on it to get it even tighter because you don't want it sagging. You want to keep that wire really taut. And so I was on the 3rd of the 4 guy wires kind of pulling, and I had pliers on the one side, and I was looping it around to try to get it really tight so that way to get a good start before I would have to use the turnbuckle to tighten it up even more. Somehow the pliers slipped off the end of the one edge of guy wire, but I was using such force to try to pull the guy wire toward me that when the pliers slipped, they hit the edge of my other hand's thumbnail and proceeded to rip most of it off. Not entirely, just enough so that way it's still hanging on for dear life and then bleeding all over the place like I had ripped half my thumbnail off in some kind of a weird Vietnam Rambo kind of scene.
Oh, that is terrible.
Oh, yeah, that was fun. I was like, I just went, that hurts. And I walked upstairs and said, I'm going to have to put a Band-Aid on this.
Oh. Yeah, that does hurt. That's not fun.
I was like, how do I time the pliers that just happen to hit my other hand just so and rip half my thumbnail off?
Ugh.
And it took about a week before it finally got to the point where the skin underneath just said, okay, we're not going to hang on to the nail anymore, and I could pull it off. So I'm hoping it grows in okay.
Well, and pretty much anything you do doesn't hurt as bad as tearing a nail off. That's bad.
I'm telling you, I felt like everything went, you know, that like high pitched whine you heard in Saving Private Ryan when the shell goes off too close to you, like that.
Yep.
And everything feels muted. And then you feel like, okay, it doesn't hurt just yet, but I know the hurt's coming.
Yeah, it's coming
because it's throbbing. I can tell it's throbbing, but I haven't been able to register in my mind how much it hurts. I guess it's a safety mechanism for me to maybe get down off the ladder and sit so that way I don't hurt myself further. But when it hit, dear Lord, I was like, ah.
Ugh. So did you have to go stitch it up or anything?
No, I mean, it just ripped off the skin of the thumbnail. And then I thought to myself, yeah, that's why it's a torture. That hurts.
Well, see, so you are walking down that road that I have paved towards proving yourself incompetent. So good job.
Right. Well, I took a page from the Walt Murray handbook. Unfortunately, my wife was like, well, just put a Band-Aid on. You'll be fine.
Yeah,
Get back down there.
She's kind of like mine, not very sympathetic to stupidity.
No, not at all. All right. Well, before we bring in our guest, and by the way, this is somebody that once again you had in your background, and I did my own research, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat with this guy. Do you have anything else that went on this past week besides Thanksgiving and enjoying, the good eats?
No, I'm the same way. I'm just ready to talk to Randy. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. I've known Randy for, gosh, I don't know, probably longer than either one of us wants to admit, particularly him. But when I was in middle school and high school, Randy was kind of a hero to everybody in our grade because he was playing football in college and then played in the pros. And I've kind of followed his career. And he's an attorney now. So he has got an incredibly interesting background. And as we get to know him a little bit, you'll find he is he has a great personality and just is a fun person to talk to. So I'm looking forward to having Randy.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Let's go ahead and welcome to our listeners lounge stage. Everybody put your hands together and welcome our guest, Randy Edwards. Randy, welcome to the listeners lounge.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Very kind words, particularly Walt lying and telling everybody I was a hero, but very kind of you to say it, and I'm not going to deny it.
Well, for folks who are, and we do have an international audience, a lot of people may not understand the difference between college football and pro football. And then there's one additional layer, which is whether you live north of the Mason-Dixon line or south, because south, it's college football, the most important versus NFL. Everybody else thinks the NFL, which is the professional league, is the big dog. And when it comes to the football conferences, there is no bigger, better, badder conference than the SEC. And so let's talk a little bit about, Randy, your foray from high school sports into the collegiate world. You got a chance to play for Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama.
Yes, I did. And as I tell people nowadays, I played for one of the two greatest coaches in the history of college football. 10, 15 years ago, there was no debate as to who the one and only GOAT was. But now there's a new guy in Tuscaloosa who is pretty good.
Yeah, he's not too bad.
He holds his own.
Well, let's go back to the beginning of this, because we always try to kind of go chronologically through our guest's time frame. Football is a different sport now than it was when you went in, not just into college, but we'll get into your pro career as well. What was it like to move from high school into college, especially at the University of Alabama?
Well, back then, that was in the late 70s, early 80s. Back then, we would throw the ball 6 or 7 times a game, whether we needed to or not. And now it's a completely different ball game. You throw the ball 50, 60 times a game. It's the hurry up, no huddle. We used to actually get in a formation where everybody would circle up and we would talk about the play. It's called a huddle. They don't do that anymore. And they would take every bit of 25 to 30 seconds between plays. We would have, if I had 65 snaps in a game, that was a lot of snaps. And now it's not unusual to have right around 100 snaps per game on each side of the ball. So the game has changed tremendously. Back then, we'd win games 10-7, 14-10, something like that. Nowadays, it's like the Alabama Ole Miss game earlier in the year. 65-49, something like that. It's
insane.
It's just insane the way the game has changed.
Well, we in radio, we like to think of it as we've all grown up with these kids now playing Xbox football. And so you got to have like these 60, 70 point games. You got to throw the bomb every time you get a chance. Everybody wants the 50, 60 yard, touchdown throw. It has totally and fundamentally changed the game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember playing in some 2-minute drills at the end of the half or end of the game in Seattle, particularly against the Denver Broncos when John Elway was the quarterback, and John was one of the early guys that could run and throw. And those were just exhausting because we wouldn't get any rest between the plays, and we'd have to just go play after play after play, but it was only for 2 minutes. Now it's like that for 60 minutes. Frankly, I don't know how guys do it.
Well, I was going to ask you, Randy, some of those guys now are carrying 300 pounds on the line and going like that for, 100 plays. I don't know how you can possibly do that. I guess the training methods and everything else are so advanced that they somehow figure out how to get through it.
Well, on defense, they're not going 100 plays. I mean, they'll rotate guys in and out. So, while the big fat offensive lineman is going 100 plays, he's only going 3 yards and then he's walking to the next play. The defensive guy has to rush the passer and then turn around and chase the ball and run the whole time. So it's a lot harder on the defensive guys, and that's why you see those guys trying to rotate in and out, and that's why the offense tries to not let them substitute, and they try to keep their same personnel on the field and try to wear out the defense.
What was your experience like going from, I guess, a program at the time that was a really solid high school program up to what at the time was probably the elite program in the country? How was that transition for you?
Well, for one thing, for me, there was a 1 year off between high school and college. I graduated in 79, was supposed to be a freshman in the fall of 79, but I took a physical for an all-star game and had, some sort of kidney infection. So I had to miss that year. So I kind of relate to all of these kids now who are missing their freshman year or missing a year because of COVID. So I stayed here in town that fall, and actually I wasn't even allowed to work out very much because they didn't really know a lot about what I supposedly had. And then I enrolled in January, so I went through the off-season program, went through spring practice, went through the summer training, and then showed up as a freshman in the fall of 1980. So that was it took a little longer for me to get there, but when I got there, I mean, in high school, every now and then you would play against a guy who was all-state, but in college, everybody you're playing against is all-state. And in particular, for me, since my first experience was in spring training of 1980, Alabama won the national championship in 1979. So the first time I lined up to hit somebody, this guy's most recent experience was playing for the national championship against Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl. So
Wow.
that is quite a step up in competition from playing, whoever, North Cobb or Marietta or whatever here in Cobb County.
So over the course of your college career, a lot of folks that we've talked to this season that had a NCAA, whether it was basketball or football or other sports, they always had their eye on their college, education. They never really thought they were going to go pro. So while you were at Alabama, which was pretty much the top of the top, as Walt said, did you think you would go to the NFL, or did you stay focused on education, or how did you balance the two?
Well, at the time, we had a really, really good program, but our players, we didn't really have that many guys going in the NFL. Coach Bryant always recruited guys that he could coach into his system. And on defense in particular, where I played, my defensive line coach, he wanted us to be able to run forever. So we didn't have a lot of guys that are these big, huge 300 plus pounders, or back then 280 would have been big. So we really didn't have that many guys go in the NFL. We had a couple would go every year, but it wasn't anything like what we have now, where we'll have 4 first rounders and 8 guys drafted and 15 guys ending up on a roster at some point the next year. So it wasn't quite the route to the NFL that it is now. So I always planned to go to law school at some point. And luckily I was able to defer that for a few years. But yeah, I always knew that my bread and butter was going to be working for a living as opposed to playing football. Playing football was a bonus, and fortunately I was able to experience that. But you always gotta have your long-term goal, and for me that was being a lawyer.
So as far as being at Alabama, what was your undergraduate, like what course of study were you heading into before what was your pre-law, I guess?
Well, in undergrad, I was in business school. I majored in corporate finance. And the reason I picked corporate finance was because after my sophomore year, maybe sometime into my junior year, I'm in the business school. So I'm talking with my advisor and trying to figure out what's the shortest path to graduation. And it turned out that the shortest path to graduation was corporate finance as opposed to marketing or something else. So that's how I chose finance.
I'm familiar with that conversation. I had that exact conversation at the end of my sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
What's the fastest way to the door? And they were happy to show me.
Right. Exactly right.
Well, Randy, what was it like playing for Bear Bryant? I mean, anybody who knows anything about college football is familiar with Bear Bryant. And for those of us particularly who grew up while he was coaching, he's a legend, and he was a larger than life person. What was it like being in that room with him?
Well, you mentioned being a larger than life person. And I was thinking about this today. He had the most commanding, intimidating presence of any person I've ever seen in my life. And a couple of examples of that. We'd be upstairs in the big meeting room, waiting for our team meeting. And the meeting room was next to Coach Bryant's office. And we'd all be sitting in there slouching and joking with the guy next to you and got your hat on and stuff like that. And as soon as we would hear that doorknob turn, everybody would take their hats off, sit up straight, and shut up. It was just absolute. When Coach Bryant walked into the room, it was dead silence. And it wasn't just us. I mean, I remember going to bowl games where we have these big luncheons with both teams there and all the coaches and all these dignitaries and people getting up to speak. And, we'd have some speaker playing University of Texas, and Fred Akers is getting up to speak, and they got to tap the glasses to get everybody to be quiet. And when it was Coach Bryant's turn, all he did was scoot his chair back, and the entire room went quiet. So he was very, very intimidating. He was not the kind of guy that you wanted to go in and sit down and joke with at any point in time.
Yeah, not a real player's coach, I guess.
Well, I mean, he obviously cared for us more than we knew at the time. But he wasn't the kind of guy that you're going to have a real close relationship with, other than the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks met with him personally all the time. And I hear Walter Lewis tell stories about meeting with Coach Bryant, and that's really something special that I did not get to experience. And also the former players, the guys that played for him. They had a much better relationship with him after their careers. And unfortunately with me, he died a month after his last game. So I didn't get to have that experience either. But speaking about caring for us, one thing he did is he set up a trust so that all of his players' children could go to Alabama. And
Really?
so my daughter is on the Bryant Scholarship at Alabama. So that's something that you don't hear about. And the NCAA granted an exemption for that. That is the only scholarship of its kind in the country.
Wow. You know what? Here you are. You're a strapping lineman. You played football. You went to the NFL, but that one just gesture of a coach that has actually touched now your own, offspring.
Right.
That's an emotional moment for you.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing.
That's incredible. And I'm assuming that's an endowment that continues to be self-funded.
His son, Paul Jr., he added to it, but yeah, it's self-funded. For a while, it was just for in-state tuition, but there are people like us who live out of state. So Paul Bryant Jr. added to it to offset the out-of-state tuition.
Wow. All right, so you're playing at Alabama.
So there's been over 2,000 children have taken advantage of that.
That's amazing. That's a legacy that you just don't hear about. I've been following sports and sports news and being aware of these kinds of endowments for different schools for different programs. Never have I heard about this from Bear Bryant.
Yep, it's amazing.
Well, and a lot of times, Randy, you hear about the guys who finish their football career and then go screw up their life, and they've got kids running around, they've got problems. Well, this kind of gives those kids, that next generation, an opportunity that if their parents can't provide that for them, or if something else goes haywire, Bear Bryant has provided that great opportunity for the next generation.
Yeah. And, Coach Bryant would always talk to us. He'd tell us stories about, whatever. And, one that he would always tell us is you got to have a plan for if you're ahead in the game. You got to have a plan for if you're behind. You got to have a plan for if it's raining. You got to have a plan for if the headsets go out and whatever. And then he would turn that around at the end of it and say, you got to have a plan in life. You got to have a plan for when your wife runs off with the drummer and the dog's sick. So he would always tell us a story about preparing us for Saturday's game against whoever, but then he would give it a little twist about you got to have a plan for when you're 40 years old and this, that, and the other.
Wow.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is a great side of Bear Bryant that I guess you just don't. Well, maybe if you're in this circle, you hear it, but that's an awesome story to tell.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move forward. You're playing in Alabama. What catches the eye of the Seattle Seahawks?
Lord knows, I have no idea. But actually, I do know. They were, back then the draft was 12 rounds, and it was all one day. So we'd have the first round in the morning, and the end of the draft would be at 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that. And I was a good player, but I was 6'3", 260, which is good size, but it's not enormous. I had good speed, but I wasn't a 4.5 guy. I wasn't a Lawrence Taylor or Cornelius Bennett type guy. So I knew I wasn't going to get drafted high. I was hoping I'd get drafted in the middle of the draft, 6th, 7th, 8th round, something like that. But I ended up not getting drafted. I was an undrafted free agent. And then about 2 in the morning, the phone started ringing from the Seahawks, the Broncos, a couple other teams calling wanting to sign me. And eventually, when I did sign with the Seahawks, I was talking with George Dyer, my defensive line coach, and we're talking about how they found me. And he said that they were actually looking at an offensive lineman, I think from Southern Miss. I may be mistaken, but they're looking at drafting this particular offensive lineman. And I happened to have a really good game against that guy. And they said, hey, we need to see who this guy is. So apparently that's how I ended up in Seattle, is they were looking at the guy I was playing, and I had a good game against him.
Wow. Some good lessons in that.
Yeah, exactly. And also thinking about this earlier today, if I had not had that year off in '79, I would have used up my eligibility at the end of the '82 season, and I would not have gone to the NFL. because I just wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, fast enough, fit enough. But we had gotten a new strength coach, a fellow named Al Miller. And Al, going through that off-season program with Al is what got me in the NFL. Got me a whole lot stronger, a lot fitter. I think I ran like a 5:45 mile. We had to run a mile for time every year back then. I ran a 5:45 mile at 260.
Wow.
So I was in really, really good shape. Could bench well north of 400 pounds. So, that's, while I did miss that 1979 national championship season, the extra year of off-season and summer conditioning is what eventually got me in the NFL.
All right, so take us through that next leap, because I've had a chance to interview some folks that went through Cartersville High School, went on to college, and they went to the NFL, and they all said something similar that I'll be curious if you say. They think just when you think the game is as fast as you can play it, you go to the NFL and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that people had told me, and I didn't believe it, because playing at Alabama, we had a good team. Playing in the SEC, it was good competition. Everybody told me that you would not believe how fast the game is in the NFL. But as soon as I started lining up against the veterans, because you have a couple of days of rookies. But once I started lining up against the veterans in training camp, those offensive linemen would be on you and have their hands on you and have their hips turned around just about before I could get out of my stance. So the speed that the offensive linemen, and everybody recognizes the speed of the wide receivers and the running backs and the defensive backs and linebackers, because those guys are just freak athletes. But what you don't recognize is the speed of the 340-pound left guard, how fast he can get out of his stance and get to the linebacker or get to the defensive tackle and get his hips around. So yeah, the speed of the game was unbelievable, and that took several days to get acclimated to. You don't get several weeks, because if you don't adjust quickly, you're, as Chuck would say, they'd give you an apple and a roadmap to get back home.
Well, the natural question to follow besides the speed of the game, you're in a league now where you probably grew up watching a lot of these people on television yourself, and now you're going to be playing up, across from them. What was that like mentally, to be going up against folks that you're thinking, oh my God, these are the guys I watched on television?
Yeah. Well, actually, I remember before my first preseason game, we're playing in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio, against Tampa Bay, I think. And Reggie McKenzie was on our offensive line. Reggie had played with O.J. Simpson back in Buffalo. He was part of what they called the Electric Company because he turned on the juice. And Reggie was in his 12th, 13th year or something like that at the time. And he was giving kind of a pregame pep talk to all the rookie offensive linemen. And I just remember watching that, thinking that this is the coolest thing. And then as I'm listening to Reggie, he's talking about, you got to get your butt down, you got to get your head up, you got to get your hands out, and you got to grab onto that son of a bitch and not let him go. And I'm thinking, all you're doing is teaching them to hold. Reggie was notorious for that. We called him the Claw.
Well, and I guess when you find something that works,
yeah.
Once again, a different day.
Yeah, but back then, the first couple of games, you're kind of overwhelmed with just where you are and what you're doing and who you're playing with and who you're playing against. But you gotta shake all that off and start producing.
Well, I noticed, Randy, that you played 84 to 87 in Seattle.
Yep.
At that time, Seattle was not the powerhouse that they are now. How was it? Was it frustrating to kind of play on a team that was on the edge every year and just never quite got across got over the top? Or how was that as an NFL player?
Well, actually, we were pretty good, but we were not we were 12-4 my rookie year, and we made the playoffs. And we were 12-2 until the last two games. Lost the last two games, and then the Raiders were in our division, and they were the defending Super Bowl champs. We played the Raiders in the playoffs in Seattle, and we beat them. So, I mean, obviously, that was a pretty big deal, beating the defending champs in the playoffs.
That's great.
But then we went down to Miami, and that's when Dan Marino was quarterback, and they beat us, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl and losing to the 49ers. But we were pretty good. I mean, there was 1 year was 86, and I saw somebody posted this on Facebook the other day that our 86 team was one of the best teams to never make the playoffs. We ended up going 10-6, and back then you had I think you had 3 divisions and 1 wild card. So you only had 4 teams make the playoffs, and for whatever reason, we didn't make the playoffs. But 3 of the 4 teams that played in the conference championships, we played. And in the last month of the season, we beat what ended up being both Super Bowl participants, the New York Giants. They beat the Denver Broncos. So we had a really good team that year, and we ended up beating the 2 teams that played in the Super Bowl by the decisive margins. So that was
so that may be more frustrating than being on a really terrible team.
Yeah. I mean, that was very frustrating, not making the playoffs that year, and then 87 made the playoffs, but got beat, I think, in the wild card round.
Well, you had, of the 4 years you were there, one of your years was a lights out year. It's the year you talk about even on your about you on your resume to this day.
Yeah. So in 84, I was a rookie, free agent, played a little bit, didn't play a lot. When somebody would get hurt, Jeff Bryant got hurt, I played a little bit for him. I had a few sacks here and there. But in 85, I was the 4th guy on the nickel pass rush. I rotated in for all 3 of the starters, Joe Nash, Jeff Bryant, and Jacob Green. So I played a pretty good bit, and we had a really good defense, and everybody was trying to block those other guys. So a lot of times I ended up with one-on-ones, and I ended up having 10.5 quarterback sacks that year.
Wow.
Which actually I think was 3rd in the league among down interior linemen. So that was pretty cool.
So what does it feel like when you really get a good run at a quarterback? I mean, that's got to almost just be surreal when you're about to get that big hit, and particularly with the speed of the game, the size of the guys that you're up against, to get loose like that and get in there. I mean, that's got to be a heck of a rush.
Well, I lined up on the guard. I was what we call a 2-technique tackle. So I lined up on the guard. I was not a speed rusher, so I did not have those just bone-jarring hits coming in from the blind side. So most of my sacks would be I would either shed the guard or push the guard into the quarterback and take them both down. So I didn't have a lot of those, but I did have a few of them. It's a very good feeling. I've got pictures. I've got one picture on my wall in the office of me sacking the quarterback for the Chiefs. And in today's game, that play would be worth 45 yards of penalties, because I led. I think I led with the top of my helmet. Questionable as to whether he still had the ball. So
but it looked great on TV, I'm sure.
It did look good. And, I remember one time against the Broncos, I had a broken hand. So I had my hand in a big old bowling ball type cast. And I got to John Elway just as he was throwing the ball, and I tried to wrap up on him, but with that bowling ball, I couldn't grab anything. So I hit the center of his chest with that bowling ball, and then the momentum carried that bowling ball up to the bottom of his chin.
Ooh.
And the offensive tackle that I beat on that play, he did not take kindly to that, so that started a big melee. But that was a memorable play, getting to hit John Elway like that.
I bet. Does Elway remember it?
I haven't talked to him, but a couple of years ago, I was taking a deposition out in Denver, and I stayed at some hotel in downtown, and they had Elway's Steakhouse and Bar down in the lobby. So I went down there and I had a drink, and I was talking to the lawyer that was traveling with me, and I said, I bet I'm the only guy in this bar that has ever personally hit John Elway in the chin.
That is awesome.
And you were the envy of everybody in there because everybody would like to do that. So.
Yeah, because they haven't been doing quite as well lately, but he was a great player. Hated playing against him.
Well, so how did you make the transition from the NFL into your legal career, Randy?
Well, that came a little earlier than I had hoped, actually. In 1988, I was traded from Seattle down to Tampa Bay. And Ray Perkins was the coach at Tampa Bay at the time, and Ray had been my coach at Alabama. And at the end of training camp, Ray decided he was going to go with younger, better athletes instead of better players, and let me go. And I thought I would get picked up fairly quickly. I did not. Talked to several teams, and they all said, well, we thought you were a good player till you went down to Tampa and got cut by your old coach. So I just said, all right, to hell with it. And took the LSAT because I was always going to go to law school at some point. And actually, I was enrolled in the University of Washington graduate school before I was traded. I was going to get an MBA JD, and I was going to get the MBA part first. But when I found myself out of football a little earlier than I wanted in 1988, I had to either get a job or go back to school. So I made the decision to go back to school.
And did you go to the University of Alabama?
Yep, I went back to Alabama. My wife Lynn, she got a job working in the finance department for the city of Tuscaloosa. So we lived off of what she was making at the time, and saved everything we'd made playing football, which wasn't much back then. But I started out in January because law school you have to start in the fall. I started out in January. I went to graduate school at Alabama. Again, thinking about the shortest path to the finish line, and started working on a master's in finance. And then in the fall, enrolled in law school. And then for the next couple of years, I would take, an elective in the business school, like for, money and capital markets, which would give me elective credit in law school. And then I would take corporate tax in law school, which would give me elective credit in the business school. So I was able to get both my law degree and a master's in finance at the same time. Thinking that what I would wanted to do was to be some mergers and acquisitions type guy, some bond, money and capital markets type guy, equity trader, something like that. But then ended up clerking at Barnes, Browning, Tanksley, and Casarella, Roy Barnes's firm, and ended up going to court quite a bit and liked it.
Was this before Roy Barnes was the governor of Georgia?
It was before he ran for governor that year and got beat by Zell. Zell Miller beat him in the primary and won the governor's race. But it was before he was finally elected governor.
And he was doing a lot of, I guess he did some business law and some personal injury, right?
Correct. He did some business work representing banks. He represented Kennestone Hospital. Not he, but the firm did. But he also did some plaintiff's work. Other guys in the office did all sorts of things. Tom Browning did domestic relations. So I quickly learned I did not want to handle divorces and family law by working with Tom. Nothing against Tom. He's a great, great guy, and his son Tyler is an excellent lawyer as well, but did not want to end up doing that type of stuff.
So what is it that you have found yourself most enjoying in law? What type of cases do you take? What kind of things do you love?
Well, I like trying cases, number one, but I really enjoy the plaintiff's personal injury practice because if a case is worth trying, if a plaintiff's personal injury case is worth trying, that means somebody has been severely harmed. And there's nothing more rewarding than holding somebody accountable and compensating someone who has been severely injured, or someone's family who has lost a loved one due to the negligence of someone else. That is a very, very rewarding thing to do.
Well, now you're moving into an area that I've got a pretty good background in. Did a lot of law firm websites. My wife was a senior paralegal and worked in a personal injury firm. That was sort of their bailiwick. How do you avoid getting the label of the ambulance chaser, though? Because there are some legitimate cases out there, and a lot of them. But then there's also those lawyers you see on TV left and right. And you're going, you're just churning them through, looking for the high dollar turnaround.
Well, I mean, people are going to say what they're going to say, so I can't control that. But I think the thing that separates me from, or separates us, our firm, from what people would consider to be the ambulance chasers is, most ambulance chasers depend on a high volume of cases. They sign cases up, they send out a demand letter, and they settle them, and oftentimes take the very first and only offer the insurance company makes. If we're going to take on a personal injury case, we take it on with the belief that we're going to end up trying the case in front of a jury. And if they end up settling with us to not try it, that's fine. But our goal is to try the case, or make the insurance company or defense firm think that we're going to try it. So we don't try to settle. We don't sign up a whole bunch of cases and settle them for pennies on the dollar. We try to.
So much like the firm my wife worked in, it's more about the quality of the individual cases, as well as being honest with the people, not just telling them anybody that walks in off the street with a complaint, you'll take it to trial, or take it, like you said, with a demand letter. You actually want to do the due diligence to ensure you've got a legitimate case in court.
Yeah, we want to have a good liability. It needs to have serious injuries, and we need to have a solvent defendant.
Okay. What area? Now, the personal injury covers a lot, from accidents and, no fault workplace injuries to, the key tam cases you could have. You could also have, someone who's owns a business or owns an apartment complex, not keeping it safe. So what are your sort of specialty areas, or what are some of the practice areas that you touch into when it comes to personal injury?
Well, I wouldn't call them a specialty. I think that might be a term of art that could get me in trouble with the state bar. But, let me just talk about cases we've handled. We currently have a case against the sheriff's office for a deputy allegedly going 103 miles an hour without his blue lights on. And my lady she saw him 200 yards down the road, didn't see the blue lights, turned in front of him, got T-boned, very serious injury. So we're working on that case now. We've handled tractor trailer cases. Those are very, very serious cases, because the tractor trailer obviously weighs a whole lot and the car doesn't weigh much. Tractor trailers are required to have a certain amount of insurance, and if someone gets severely hurt, those injuries are significant. We have handled several motorcycle cases, and that is kind of a niche that we've done well in, and we like those cases because if you're injured on a motorcycle, you're probably injured pretty badly. And we've tried a couple of cases against Suzuki for defective front brakes. They had a recall in the summer of 2013 for defective front brake design. And that's the subject, literally, of another podcast that I did last week. But they had a lot of really, really bad facts. We tried one of those cases, got a $12.5 million verdict here in Douglas County, Georgia. Tried a second case in Mississippi, got a defense verdict because the facts were different, and the judge would not let in all of the bad evidence that we had against Suzuki from all these other cases.
So for folks who may not know, because they may have never been injured, they've never looked for a personal injury attorney, you generally work on a contingency basis. Can you explain for those folks who are maybe hurt for the first time, what does that mean?
for a personal injury case, it's almost always a contingency. The only way I would take a PI case on an hourly is if it's not a good case and we needed work to keep the doors open. So I've never actually done that. But a contingency means, as you hear on TV all the time, we don't get paid unless you do. We have a lot of expenses that we have to incur in handling a personal injury case. There's obviously the filing fee, which is only a couple of $100s, but expert witnesses, we have to take depositions. Used to be we would have to travel all over the country to take depositions, although nowadays we've learned how to take depositions over the internet via Zoom. So that's one of the good things that's come out of this pandemic. But basically, there's we don't get paid if we don't recover. So we have skin in the game with our clients.
You're covering all of the cost of all of the research, the everything that goes into pulling your case in front of the in front of the judge. You're all of that is out of pocket until day one, and then you go all the way through the trial, hoping that you win the case, and then the contingency is you get paid on the backside.
Correct. And Scott and I, my partner, I mean, we have a line of credit. We have with a local bank, and if necessary, we will borrow 6 figures. We've never had to go to 7 figures, but we have borrowed several $100,000 to fund the expenses on significant cases in the past.
All right, so you talked about the big case with Suzuki. That's obviously a high dollar one. But do you have some specific cases that you can talk about that were sort of like, hallmarks of your career, things when you look back and go, they were all good cases because we did help people, but these were the ones that really stand out?
Yeah, that's one, of course. Another one is a tractor trailer case that we handled a year or so ago. A woman and her, I guess he was then 17-year-old son, were on their way to a heavy metal concert in Dallas, Texas. And they were stuck in road construction and got just plowed into by a tractor trailer. And, the young kid, I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere, Eastern Texas, Tyler, Texas. And, he's watching his mom being life flighted away. And he doesn't have anything, literally doesn't have anything, because everything got lost or destroyed in the crash. He ended up having to steal he found his mother's suitcase and got her pink Crocs to wear. So that case was one we settled for a confidential amount, but it was a decent amount, and that was very very rewarding to be able to help them. Some of the commercial cases we handled, for better or worse, you can thank me for the amendment to the Georgia Constitution back in 2010 or 11 that made it easier to enforce restrictive covenants, because I had a big restrictive covenant case that went to the Georgia Supreme Court where we won. I represented an Atlanta bred company franchisee who had been terminated for allegedly breaking his violating his non-competes because he opened a bar and the bar had a salad. But that went all the way to the Supreme Court. We won that, and the Chamber of Commerce started attacking us and that case, and there was a totally bogus campaign to amend the Georgia Constitution to supposedly make Georgia more competitive by making it easier for courts to enforce reasonable competitive agreements, when the actual language was the exact opposite of that. So that's one where we won the battle and lost the war, but we still handle a number of those cases.
All right. Now, I did look at your CV or your resume, and you are actually allowed, or you're authorized to practice in more than just the state of Georgia. What was the point of doing that? Why did you want to have a more of a southeast extension in where you can practice?
Well, when my first job out of law school was with Tom Cawthorn and Wayne Phillips, 2 former judges here in Cobb County. And back then, you could take the Georgia bar your final semester of law school. So I took the Georgia bar in February, and given, my who I am and my background in the state of Alabama, they wanted me to be licensed to practice in Alabama as well. So I took the Alabama bar in the summer. I've been licensed in Alabama since 1992. Matter of fact, I filed a case today over in Jefferson County, Alabama. It's a commercial case, but we will file cases in Alabama, and if we need to file a case elsewhere, we'll do that. I've tried cases to jury verdicts in Tennessee and in Mississippi. I've handled cases literally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to the Western District of Washington in Tacoma, Washington. So we'll go anywhere where we're needed.
Now, is there such thing as some states that have reciprocity, or do you have to be bar approved in every individual state?
No, you can get admitted into a court on a limited basis or on a case-by-case basis. That's called admitted pro hac vice for the case. So, case in Florida, in those cases, you have to have local counsel, and the local counsel will basically vouch for you before the local judge, and you will be admitted for a special purpose to appear in that one case.
Gotcha.
So that's how that works.
Well, this is the perfect now segue into how you and Walt seem to have known each other. I understand that detectives are sometimes used by your firm or other firms to, try to get the details you need to go to trial.
Absolutely. And Walt has had a relationship with the firm before Scott and I joined forces. Jeffrey Tucker, a lawyer in our office, he and Walt have been good friends forever. But yeah, we hire Walt's firm on a number of occasions to either talk to the police and get more detail on a case, to get some records that maybe the police doesn't want to give us, or because there's a criminal case they can't give us. We have Walt try to track down witnesses and suspects all the time. There are other more interesting stories that Walt and I could talk about, but due to confidentiality, we cannot. I wish we could. We have some very interesting stories.
Oh, you can't change the names to save the stupid?
No.
All right, looks like we've got our PI back. He's such a good private investigator. We didn't even notice him slip out of the room, solve a case, and come right back.
Yeah, it's the case of why does my internet keep crashing? So
now we can circle back around and answer the question that I was asking before I realized, oh wow, he's gone. The relationship between you and the lawyers, the folks that go into the courtrooms, the ones that are actually representing those harmed, they sometimes rely on you, and we had a chance to hear some of the things that you're asked to do. So I just wanted to turn around and sort of put you in the spotlight and chat about what it is like to help these attorneys to try to gather the evidence, the testimony, the records, whatever it is that they're looking for to be able to make their case in court.
Well, for me, a lot of times that is the key. And that's one of the reasons I like working with Randy and some of the other attorneys I work with, is that I have a pretty good idea of what Randy's looking for. If it's an unusual case or whatever, he spells it out to me. I know on one of the motorcycle cases I was working with him, there was a very specific thing that they were looking for. And so that was our task. Go find out if these set of circumstances fit this case. So for me, I'm an information gatherer at the end of the day, whether that comes from witnesses or going out and taking scene pictures, talking to the police that worked the case or whatever. I'm out there gathering information for people like Randy. So, like I said, for me, one of the best things about working with Randy and the other guys in his firm is they do a pretty good job of laying out, here's our case, here's where we're going with it, here's what we think the exposure is. Let's go get that information. I have other attorneys who just say, there was a wreck, go find out what you can about it, which is fine. I go out and find out everything I can. But I also enjoy working some of those cases that Randy and his team work that are a little bit more involved, deeper cases, a lot more interviews, some that have had mechanical issues or construction failures. Those to me are really interesting because they go beyond just sitting in a car and staring at a house, which it does have its place and is an important part of my job. But when I'm really able to think through things and gather that kind of information, those are great cases for me. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy working with Randy. And it seems like every single time Randy and I work together, there is something that comes out in that case that is really weird or really unusual, some set of facts that show up. We had one with that involved a surveillance that was just mind blowing to both of us. And so we've had those great cases that I always want to talk about and I can't, but that's my role in all that is I'm a support person. I'm out there gathering info.
Yeah. The only thing we can say about that one case in particular is to the listeners out there, if you have a job and you're working for somebody, for a company, please understand that your employer has the right to read your emails.
That probably is the best advice any attorney can give anybody.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not my own private computer. I can just start looking at any website I want and email whatever I want.
Well, and also understand that if you're on your private computer at home looking at whatever, it's on the computer. It doesn't matter if you delete it from your search history or if you're talking by Snapchat or whatever, it's on there. And the right people can find it. And that type of stuff is devastating.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The technology that we have at our disposal, it makes it so easy to interconnect and talk to people, but at the same time, it's so much harder to hide that stuff.
Once it's out there, it's out there.
Well, and that's why I encourage people, from my perspective, put everything on Facebook. I mean, just put it out there for the whole world to see. Makes my life a whole lot easier.
You know what? You're not the first detective I've talked to who has said social media has just somehow opened up an entire new door of investigating stupidity.
Yeah.
It really has. It really has.
And that's one thing I always tell my personal injury clients is don't talk about your case on Facebook. Don't talk about how you're hurt or not hurt. The case we had in Mississippi, the Suzuki case we had in Mississippi, one thing the clients did was they posted, they had their blog, so they would post stuff on their blog about the guy didn't recall the wreck. He had absolutely no memory from the night before, so he had no recollection whatsoever. So he's just posting, trying to let everybody know he's okay. Although he's a T6 paraplegic, he's severely injured. Want everybody to think he's okay, and says, "Hey, it's okay, folks. I don't blame the bike. I don't blame the bike. Blah 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 blah." Well, the judge let all that in, but then he wouldn't let it in or say, "Hey, everybody, we just found out the brakes failed because of blah." So, it's like they say, whatever you put on social media can and will be used against you, and whatever you put out there that's helpful probably is not coming in. So just don't put anything on social media about your case. That's it's my second free lawyer tip of the day.
All right. So note to self, I get myself in a really bad car accident, don't have pictures of me on video playing on the trampoline with the kids and then pretending to limp into court.
Right.
Yes. I mean, you've seen those 2020 investigative reports where people do that. And
there's an entire line of people that get busted for insurance fraud just for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of what I do. I go out and look at stuff like that. Well, and I think the worst case of that I've ever seen, I was working opposite this guy, and he claimed he was completely sober at the time of the accident. And on one of the days that he was supposed to be in court for a hearing, he posts on Facebook, and this is at 9:00, right when he's supposed to be in court. It's 4:20 at my house, and guess who isn't in court? Ha, ha, ha. So I happened to be sitting there on my laptop trying to figure out where this guy was. And the attorney, I showed it to the attorney and he grabbed my laptop and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to show the court this guy's Facebook page right now." I have not in my life ever seen anybody's head literally explode, but I think that judge's head just about exploded, and his attorney fired him. He dropped him as a client that day. So, that don't be dumb.
Well, don't
really,
be dumb. There you go. Walt has coalesced it to 3 words. Don't be dumb.
Well,
I need to follow my own advice, but
before the days of social media, my partner Scott was trying a divorce case, and he was representing the wife, and he was a plaintiff. He got up and made his opening statement, and then the defense lawyer got up and made his opening statement and basically said, "So and so is not a nice term," and turned out that that month she was literally in Hustler magazine. So
wow,
it's it's amazing how stupid people can be, either in social media or whatever, but by doing stuff that will just absolutely destroy their case. And they ended up settling that case by neither parent getting custody of the children. The custody went to the grandparents.
Oh wow, that there's 2 pieces of work right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Randy, I get asked this question from time to time, and I know I've run some of these by you, but one of the questions I do get asked by people is, when is your case big enough to go talk to an attorney? And what do you usually tell people about that? Is it the $400 worth of damage and I went to the chiropractor twice, or what is it that brings somebody to your office?
Well, for us to be interested in the case, we need to have some visible damage to the vehicle, obviously, not just a little scratch here or there. And we need some objective evidence from the doctors, an x-ray of a broken bone or something significant. We need several $1,000s worth of medical expenses, several $1,000s worth of lost wages, unless you're not working for whatever reason. But we need to have some significant injuries. There are lawyers who don't do that, and I mean, people can call us anyway, and we'll say, "Yeah, you need to call somebody else." But we, as I said, we want to have fewer, better cases instead of trying to make money on turning over a high volume of cases. So that's why we have to have some minimum threshold of some significant injuries, some at least 4, maybe 5 figures in medical expenses, and some lost wages we can point to.
And how can somebody find you, Randy?
Well, our website is www.cochraneedwardslaw.com, or you can Google me, Randy Edwards, attorney, and you might find my old Seahawks football card as well.
Yeah, I found that earlier.
I was just about to say, do you know what your 1986 Topps card is going for on eBay?
I don't know, a couple of bucks maybe.
99 cents.
Yeah.
But $5 shipping.
I get 1 or 2 of those a week for people. People send them to me with a self-addressed stamped envelope for me to sign and send back. So,
that's cool.
Really?
Yeah. So it's one thing for them to send them to my office, but it does concern me how they find my home address.
Don't forget, if it's online, it's out there.
Yeah.
Well, when we moved from the football to the law discussion, I actually wanted to go back around and ask, how surreal is it to have playing cards with your face on it, like trading cards? Because that would be weird to me.
Well, it was cool back in the day, and so it's nice to have something that people show me from time to time, and when you try cases, even though the jurors are told not to, they Google everybody, so they always see that. and they talked to me about it afterwards.
So one of my final questions is going to be, how does all of the competition of football, of, the working out, the focus, the effort that you had in your first half of your life, how does that relate to what you do now as a lawyer?
Well, years ago, I was up for partner at Kilpatrick Stockton, and back we had to have a meeting with some member of the partnership committee who was outside of my practice group. So I was in there meeting with this guy who was some corporate tax type guy, and he said, "We've got some very impressive candidates this year." And he started going through the list. So and so clerked for Justice Rehnquist at the Supreme Court. So and so has a PhD in molecular biology and is admitted to the patent bar, and stuff like that. And said, "How do you compare to that?" I said, "Well, I don't know that I stack up in those terms, but I did have 3 sacks against the Jets one day." And he just gave me this what Chuck Knox would call a Brook Trout look. He would look at me with his eyes wide open, and his mouth would just kind of be going up and down like whoa, whoa, whoa. And he had no clue. He had no clue what it meant, but I was being serious, because as a litigator, as a trial lawyer, you have to be able to perform under pressure. If you clerk for Justice Rehnquist, you've got months and months to write the opinion and go through draft after draft after draft. If you got a PhD in molecular biology and you're admitted to the patent office, again, you got months and months and months to refine whatever it is you're working on. But if you're trying a case, you've got to react in split-second timing, and you've got to be able to adjust on the fly. And that's what I was able to do as a football player, because if I'm planning to, rush the A gap between the center and the guard, but then the guard closes down, I've got to be able to adjust and go through the B gap and stuff like that. So playing football, another Chuckism, you got to have a fine focus on the task at hand. So I was able to concentrate on exactly what I needed to do. I was prepared. And I always had a plan B for, okay, if this guy's, if he's beating me this way, I got to have a counter. I got to do this, that, and the other. And so you've always got to be prepared, and you've got to be able to adjust on the fly. And one final little comment about Alabama: the Suzuki case we tried here in Douglas County. We tried it in February of 2018, right after the Alabama-Georgia national championship game. And the judge in that case was Neil Detmering. And Neil played football at Auburn in the 70s. He's a few years older than me, but he played football at Auburn. And we kind of, messed with each other throughout the history of that case. Well, one day, my opponent, the lawyer for Suzuki, he wanted me to tell him who we were going to call as our witnesses the next day. And I didn't want to cooperate with the guy. I was mad at him for whatever he had done that day. So I wasn't going to tell him. And he told the judge, he complained to the judge, said, "Judge, can't you please make Randy tell us who he's planning to call tomorrow so we can prepare for that witness and not waste our time preparing for everybody?" So I told the judge, I said, "Judge, I can tell him who I'm planning to call right now, but I might have to change quarterbacks at halftime." And the judge just kind of looked at me like, "Yeah."
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know what that means.
Yeah,
I could almost see the judge turn around going, "I'm awful sorry you actually have to do the job of preparing for everybody, but you're going to have to do your job."
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's what, at the end of the day, that's what has prepared me is, you have to work hard. Coach Bryant used to tell us to start off his Saturday morning speech the same way every week. He'd say, "You got to be courteous to the officials, expect the unexpected, and go till you hear the echo of the whistle." So that's that's the way I try to approach it is, be courteous to the people you're trying to case in front of and against, particularly the jury. Expect the unexpected, expect the witness, to change up his story from what he said in his deposition, and be prepared to impeach him with it. and go until the case is over.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've had, and I know Walt's in a position of leadership at the firm that he's at, but I've had the opportunity to have the ability to hire and bring people on board for various teams. And I will tell you, people who have grown up or at least participated in team sports or been in the military tend to be some of the best folks to bring into your team. And it's part of that is the can-do attitude. It's the plan B. It's the focus. And a lot of times you don't get that unless you're part of a team sport or part of the military.
Right. Yeah. When I was at Kilpatrick Stockton, I was on part of the recruiting team, and I always wanted to have somebody in for an interview if I saw that they played college sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever, because somebody who played sports at that level, it tells me that they work hard, that they aren't afraid of competition, and that they can perform under pressure.
Excellent. Walt, I think we wanted to make sure that we asked before we have to let our guest go about his previous podcast recording prior to debuting with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, could you kind of give us the rundown on that podcast and what that was all about?
Yeah, this was actually last week. It was the Great Trials podcast. We lawyers from Harris, Lowry, and Manton, and that was based upon the Suzuki, the Adrian and Gwen Johns versus Suzuki case. So we recorded that last Monday. It is still not up as we are sitting here today on November 24th, but hopefully it will be up in the next week or so, and yours will be up, I guess, around the same time. But yeah, that was very interesting. It was three of us. It was myself, John Sherrod, and Paul Pyland. And Walt, I know you know Paul. I think you may know John because John also went to Wheeler High School.
I do know John. Yeah.
Yeah, John is he was a year or so after me, but he was on the football team at Wheeler with me. So we've got that background. He and Scott, my partner, went to law school together. Since we're going to, his office is in Douglasville. So since we were going to file the case in Douglasville because that's where the Adrian bought his motorcycle, we got John in to help us try the case. And, that was fun. It's a lot of inside baseball with that type of podcast because it's mainly for lawyers, not necessarily Gene Wilder fans. So we talked a lot of high level lawyer stuff as to how to get in this type of evidence and what do you do when this happens and stuff like that. But it was really, really fun. And again, the takeaway from that is the teamwork. The teamwork is what won that case for us. Paul he reviewed hundreds of thousands of documents in Japanese. He ran them through Google Translate.
Wow.
So we can see what they were, and if they were an interesting document, then we would go to the trouble and expense of having them translated, and then we had to figure out a way to get the documents into evidence. So that goes back to another Chuck-ism about the 6 Ps, about how perfect preparation prevents piss poor performance. So we had to have a plan to get the documents into evidence. And what we did was we actually called Suzuki's in-house counsel for cross-examination and got him to authenticate all of the smoking gun documents. And that went great before lunch. And then after lunch, apparently he had fallen and hit his head because he did not remember anything after lunch.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Mysterious ailment.
That's
yeah. I don't
such
know
a
what
surprise.
May have had a call from the board of the executive board.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's got to be the fun part too, because there's a team of people who take just as seriously the opposition approach to every case, and that's what I think is awesome about the legal system.
Yeah, and in that case, I mean, they took those cases extremely seriously, and they had the same firm defending all the cases across the country. Paid those guys millions and millions of dollars because they didn't want to pay us anything, and they ended up paying us quite a bit.
Awesome. You know what, Randy? I always enjoy meeting people who are professionals in whatever it is they do and who love what they do. And it's been an awesome time hanging out, chatting with you.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I gave Walt the name of a couple other guys yesterday that have also interesting stories to tell. Hopefully that'll work out. But I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Really do appreciate you coming on. So,
all right, guys.
And we took a little more time than we had promised you, so apologize to your wife. And
no problem.
Or she may want to thank us. I don't know. It's like my wife. Thanks. Take as long as you want.
Well, I'm usually not even home by this time. I came home early to work out and do this. So
excellent.
She's used to not seeing me.
All right. Well, we're going to continue the rest of the show, so you can just drop off, and then Walt and I will continue. We got a good 20 minutes worth of content still to go.
All right, guys. Roll Tide.
Take care, buddy.
Thank you, Randy.
Go Dogs. And now it's time for that segment that we all can't wait for. Every time we get done with the guest, the next thing we do is immediately dig into the graveyard for our Bring Out Your Dead segment.
Bring out your dead!
Well, we are digging into the graveyard today. This guy is a piece of work. This comes to us from shelterBeliefKFuneralHome.com. So look that up and, whatever in your spare time. Tim Schrant, age 63 of Spillville, Iowa, died Friday, March 29th, 2019 at Gunderson Health System in La Crosse, Wisconsin, after a short battle with cancer. A funeral service was held on April 4th at a local Catholic church that I cannot pronounce in Spillville. Burial was at the church cemetery with full military rights. Tim Schrant, who went by Leonard for some reason, made his last inappropriate comment on March 29th, 2019. If you're wondering if you've ever met him, you didn't, because you would remember. For those of you that did meet him, we apologize, and we're sure he probably offended you. He was world-renowned for not holding back and telling it like it is. Tim was born to Bill Schrant and Mary Schrant, June 11th, 1955, 100 years too late. Given Tim's demeanor, he would have been the perfect weathered cowboy in the Old West, or a rough riding pioneer, or maybe he should have just been Amish. Tim spent his childhood and early adulthood ordering his 7 siblings around and in general tormenting them. He was a great orator, not like Shakespeare, but more like Yogi Berra. He always had something to say, and he always had to get in the last word. His position as king orator around the family was challenged by the nuns at St. Welenclaw's School in Spillville. He may have met his match. We're not saying the nuns won, but they put up a good fight. We mean literally. He got into fisticuffs with a nun. I'm sure that's a heck of a story. In fairness, he probably started it. You don't take a swing at Tim and not expect one back. Tim's fondness for authority, his own, not others, followed him to South Winnemucca High School in Calamar and later into the Army. This proved for many interesting episodes and stories, detentions and demotions, and a few run-ins with the law, not just locally, but globally. Tim worked at Camcar, Stanley Black & Decker, and Decoreth as a tool and die maker for 30 plus years. Tim worked with many friends and a bunch of morons. His words, not ours. Well, not exactly his words, because that would have included a bunch of swear words too. Tim leaves behind a hell of a lot of stuff that his family doesn't know what to do with. So if you're looking for a Virgin Mary in a bathtub shrine, you Catholics know what we're talking about, you should wait the appropriate amount of time and get in touch with the family. Tomorrow would be fine.
The appropriate amount of time. Tomorrow will be fine.
Tomorrow, if you give us a call like 9 a.m., that'd be awesome. To his siblings' amazement, he was actually able to snag a good woman, Cheryl Murray, and hold on to her for the past 13 years. And as far as we know, restraints were not used. Tim also created great memories and stories for Cheryl's kids, Alex and Samantha, and grandkids Tatum and Grace. He will be having a reunion with his infant daughter, Ashley, his brother, Duke, and his dad, Bill, many aunts and uncles, and a handful of cousins that passed before him. Tim was in charge of getting the beer and ice for our family reunions, so they will be happy to see him. A common line in the obituaries is, he never met a stranger. In Tim's case, he met a rule. He never met a rule he couldn't break, a boundary he couldn't push, a line he couldn't cross, and a story he couldn't stretch. Another common obituary phrase is, he'd give you the shirt off his back. Well, Tim was prepared to do this, and he can do it quickly because he always wears shirts 3/4 unbuttoned.
With a gold chain.
Yeah, there you go. Tim was anything but common. Despite his crusty exterior, cutting remarks, and stubbornness, there was actually evidence that he was a loving, giving, and caring person. That evidence is the deep sorrow and pain in our hearts and the family that his family feels from his passing. Tim led a good life and had a peaceful death, but the transition was a bitch. And for the record, he did not lose his battle with cancer. When he died, the cancer died. So technically it was a tie. He was ready to meet his maker. We're just not sure the maker is ready to meet Tim. Good luck, God.
Good luck, God.
We're considering establishing a GoFundMe account for the G. Heilman Brewing Company, the brewers of old style beer, as we anticipate they're about to experience significant hardship as a result of the loss of Tim's business. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
The financial losses actually hit the books.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that's a fantastic one. I really love that obituary.
And the segment, if you go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes, we didn't really have a title for it, and it's sort of just slowly evolved. But I love looking forward to the obit of the week.
I do too. And when I go through some of these, I mean, there are weeks I go through 15 or 20 before I get to the one, and I'm finding myself drawn more to stuff like this, where the people liked him. He left a great legacy. There's something fun to catch on to about him, and a good lesson. And I think all these people, I think the lesson is life's shorter than we expect it to be. So go have fun.
Mm-hmm. You know what they always say? You only live once. No, you only die once. You get to live every day.
If you
choose to.
That's very true. Very true.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move into our news segment, where you and I each get to pick some interesting item that happened in the news somewhere, maybe in the country or around the world. We like to call it
It's no bullshit.
Well, the first one today comes from skynews.com. So, that's a European story. So we're going international. Motorist crashes into West Yorkshire house and drives off with the front door lodged in the windscreen.
Where'd I get there?
It just goes to show you, folks, that these people are everywhere. A motorist crashed into a house before driving off with the property's front door lodged in the vehicle. West Yorkshire police posted a photograph of the Audi on Twitter following the incident on Ashworth Road, Dewsbury, shortly before 7:45 on Friday. The driver, an 18-year-old man, collided with another car before hitting the front porch of the house, according to the police force. Despite the property's front door being lodged in the car's roof and windscreen, the motorist continued driving for several meters, police said. The driver was arrested on suspicion of driving while unfit through drink or drugs, the police force added. He was taken to a hospital with head injuries, but is not thought to have been seriously hurt, a police spokesman told Sky News. Anyone who witnessed the incident is asked to contact police.
It's no bullshit.
So basically, if you do something that ends up on the police Twitter feed, you're not doing it right.
Well, when they talk about the head injury, I wonder if it's because he banged his head on the door. Well, it came through the windshield. They
have a picture with this, so go to skynews.com. Look at this. It is like the door fell into the front seat, and if you're in the passenger seat, it's laying in your lap. I mean, it is insane, and the whole car is just beat to crap. So this kid really did it right. His parents are going to kill him.
Yeah, he may not have suffered any serious injury, but he already had plenty of brain damage. What was that?
That was my stupid watch talking to me. Every once in a while, it thinks I'm talking to it, and I'm like, "Shut up, dude! Leave me alone."
Well, let's go with the trend here with drunkenness, and I've got a story of a woman who decided she was going to show people how to do it on a plane.
Oh gosh!
Look, if you've flown before, you know that people watching is probably one of the best things you can do, and the people on planes sure get a show when it comes to a drunken woman. Let's go to the story of a 25-year-old who was arrested for disorderly conduct and public intoxication. You think, why are we talking about that? That happens all the time. Now, the woman, I don't even understand why. The woman decided she needed to strip down to her underwear and a t-shirt while doing the incident. Sierra Nicole McClinton from University City, Texas, said she was arrested by the Mobile, Alabama Airport Authority police after flight UA 4332 was forced to divert off its intended flight plan on November the 5th. The flight arrived about an hour and a half later after its unscheduled stop. Now, apparently, McClinton was fighting with another passenger before a flight attendant stepped in to try to calm the situation. According to police, McClinton appeared intoxicated. After unsuccessfully calming her, the flight attendant and another passenger had to restrain her until the flight could be diverted to Mobile. Now, by the time the flight landed, for whatever reason, McClinton had undressed as far as her underwear and a t-shirt, making a big stink of it. She swore and yelled, and all the while was being removed from the plane in her undies. It's not quite clear what the confrontation was about, but hopefully she got something before she went to prison. She might have a good friend when she arrives.
It's no bullshit.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I'm trying to imagine. I have had my share of inebriated evenings, and unless it was ending with a woman, I don't find a reason to take my clothes off.
No, I mean,
not if I'm in an angry argument. I'm not making a point by ripping my shirt and pants off.
Yeah, I mean, rule of thumb for life is there are very few situations where you really want to take your clothes off. And if you're drunk and, do whatever you need to do. I mean, write it on your hand, carry a list. Let's see. Am I at home in my own bathroom getting ready for bed? No. Then the clothes stay on.
The clothes stay on. Am I in public?
Right. Am I at a doctor's office? No. Am I at home? No. Okay. It's not hard.
Is this the Saturday that the kids and the wife all took off and I'm just binge watching movies? Right. No. Okay. Right. Did the pizza already arrive beforehand? That's a key.
Right.
You don't want to answer the door also in the buff. That's always fun for the pizza person.
As a former pizza person, no, it's not. Nobody wants to see that.
Why is it always the wrong people that show up to the door butt naked?
Right. That is a great question.
All the movies I see, that's not reality. The movies, they all looked hot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, real life, not so much.
Yeah, no. It's like the nude beach or the what do you call it? The nude resorts. You always think, oh, that'd be so cool, because in your head you're thinking, oh my God, like all these hot people walking around naked. Then you get there and like, oh, it's grandma and grandpa butt naked and they weigh 300 pounds apiece. Ooh.
Yeah, no, I've been to one in Europe, and it's not exciting.
Well, Walt, look at you.
It's not good. Well, in some places that's all they've got. I mean, like, that's just Europe, and yeah, it's not good. It's not what you're expecting.
I never want to find myself in a position where parts of my body decide to react in ways in public that I don't need to be seeing.
Alan, I could kind of guarantee at the beaches that I was at, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, but then that'd be my luck. I'd still be going, oh, I got Mr. Happy going, wait, what's going on? There's anything worth tapping over there? Or?
Probably more cold chills.
Like, yeah, I'd be keeping cold water on me. Spray it.
No, you'd just be shuddering. Going, no. Nobody wants to see that. Put that away.
Put it away.
Put it on. It's like the reverse strip club.
Right.
I'll give you $1 if you put it on.
You guys want to see some more? No, I've seen enough already.
Make it rain so these people will leave. Oh, man. All right. Well, the next one we've got comes from jalopnik.com, which is some kind of Canadian news source. Toronto police pull over a car with 30-year expired plates.
Oops.
What's more appealing? A $110 fine for expired plates, or spending $120 a year on renewing your plates when you've been getting by just fine without it? Yeah, it really is. It really is. One Toronto driver has opted for the former, making it by for 30 years without renewing his plates.
You know what happened? Year one, he goes, man, I can't believe I dodged that. But I'm going to go ahead and take care of this. And then one thing led to another. It was year two. He's like, well, I haven't been caught yet. So now year three, and then finally decided, well, until they catch me, I'm just not going to bother.
Right. Yep. Until
30 years later.
30 years later. Yep. According to the TPS traffic service, the officer who pulled over the car claimed, okay, wait a minute. Let me reread that sentence. According to the TPS traffic service, the officer who pulled over the car claimed that he was only 8 years old when the plates expired in August of 89. And that's not even the record. The officer in the thread noted that they'd recently come across plates that expired in 1984. Forgetting to renew your plates is one thing, and it's something that officers in Ontario have been very forgiving about during the COVID-19 pandemic. If you haven't had the means to renew, they'll lower the fine to send you on your way. That is not the case with this fella. He may have saved $3,600 these past 30 years avoiding the renewal, but he's getting a full fine. A mere $110 seems pretty paltry when you consider the fact that his vehicle has probably been uninsured for the past few years, if not during the entire 30-year period. Hopefully, the driver will get car insurance updated, and if he's going to be taking it for more frequent cruises, I sure as heck wouldn't want to be in an accident with a wholly uninsured driver. But I have to admit that I'm impressed with the driver's sense of economy. The twit didn't mention that what car it was, but if this is one of the occasional cruises that you only take out every so often, taking a $110 slap is more financially savvy than renewing the license plate every year. I can't say I endorse this, but I can kind of understand it.
It's no bullshit.
So that is from jalopnik.com. That is probably not real good advice on their part. Renew your stupid tags and don't be this guy.
That's just amazing. It's because more of a statement of the police not catching him that long. Because I mean, every month, it's at the beginning of the month because the way they do it here in our state, every birth month you have to have new tags on your car, and so usually within the first few days of the next month, you always have that cop just sitting on the corner looking at tags going by, saying, "Oh, there's last month, a year ago last month. We got to go ahead and pull them over."
Yeah, and you don't know if it's like they kind of alluded to. You don't know if it's a red barchetta situation where it's been sitting in a garage for 30 years and he just takes it out every once in a while and just happens to get nabbed finally, or if it's something that he's driving to work every day and just skirting the law. And I don't know whether to say kudos to him or quit being a jerk, but anyway,
there's a small part of me that knows he's beating the system, and there's that little underdog voice that goes, "You do it, man. You stick it to the government."
Well, right. I was going to say there's also a small part of me that says, why do we have to pay for license plates anyway? It's none of the government's business what kind of car I drive. But that's just me and my crazy Looney Tunes.
Look, how can they afford all the other things they want to spend your money on if they don't collect it?
Right. True. Fair enough.
You got all these great ideas, but they need your money to do it.
That is true. That is true.
All
Thank you for straightening me out on that.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Well, I've got the final news story, and I think this is one you and I, well, first of all, when we get to this age, I want a story like this about me. 81-year-old man beats 3 burglars out of his house with a vintage walking stick.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yep. We've all heard the phrase, the Teddy Roosevelt advice, speak softly and carry a big stick. Well, it's a common scene in Saturday morning cartoons and comedies. An elderly person, be it grandma or grandpa, grabbing a walking stick and chasing someone around while beating him around the head. Now, usually such an instance of violence is used to elicit laughs from the audience, but there was nothing funny about it when an octogenarian Illinois man actually had to resort to the same trick to defend his home from burglars. Dan Donovan, an 81-year-old former Marine, devil dog, and his wife Barbara lived in Niles, Illinois. For the past 50 years, Niles is a fairly quiet, roughly 30,000 resident town, and the Donovans know it like the backs of their hands. So when a man claiming to be from the electric company showed up at their front door and asked to get in, they had no reason to doubt him. Turns out, you can never be too careful. It all began when the Donovans were having a quiet afternoon at home when they heard a knock on their front door. At the door stood a man in a reflective, high-visibility vest and a face mask. Now, the masked man said he represented an electric company and they were there to check on the Donovan's fuse box. Now, he sure seemed to be geared like an electrical worker. To top off the illusion, the man also carried a toolbox. Now, Dan said that the electric company had actually contacted them earlier, saying that there would be a team of people in the neighborhood within the coming weeks. As a result, the residents should expect some short-term power outages. So thinking about that said, oh, maybe that's what's going on right now. Now, the couple led the supposed electric worker into their basement and pointed out the fuse box for him. The man, however, started to behave strangely. Barbara said she became suspicious of the man when he kept asking her to come on over closer to the fuse box. Just come on over here by me. Come on. If you look, I don't want you're home alone and I don't want you guys getting hurt or anything. So I'd rather you be kind of close to me. Well, that's when Barbara decided that's a little weird that you'd have somebody who'd want you to be by their electrical box working for the electric company. Normally, you'd think they'd want to be left alone. And that's when she heard the creak from the floors upstairs. You guessed it, the electrician was the point person, is the diversion, as two other accomplices broke into the house and began slowly loading up pillowcases with stuff from their bedroom. Well, the Barbara heard the floorboard creak and yelled to her husband, and together the couple dashed up the stairs, closely followed by the burglar who kept trying to stay in the act of like, no, come on back here. I got to show you this fuse box. Well, when they got to the top of the basement stairs, Dan and Barbara came face to face with two criminals, one of them carrying a pillowcase from their bedroom. That's when Dan grabbed his grandfather's shillelagh. Now, here's an explanation for you folks who are not Irish. The shillelagh is an Irish invention, a walking stick that doubles as a handy cudgel should trouble arise.
Yes, it does.
The stick is usually made from hard, sturdy wood and has a large knob or a handle on the top, and it features prominently in Irish folklore and is a kind of a national symbol for Ireland. Well, with the shillelagh in hand, Dan went swinging, bashing him over the head as they started to flee the home. The burglars had no idea the flailing that was coming, and all they could do was run straight outside. The one, though, with the pillowcase still clung to it, I guess in shock, not being able to drop it. They ran out to their SUV, but Dan wasn't about to allow them out scot-free. Barefooted, he chased them out to the SUV and began whacking the windshield and the side windows.
That is awesome.
I think I managed to get a good one at the windshield and the rear window. I think I cracked them both.
As the
burglars took off from the driveway, Barbara was already on the phone with police, and law enforcement soon arrived. So all's well that ends well, the final paragraph here. Luckily enough, the burglars were not armed, or if they were, they clearly decided that it would be better to run from Dan and his walking stick than to risk further injury. The elderly couple also isn't quite sure what the burglars were after. They did make it out with one pillowcase, but apart from that, they weren't able to find anything else that seemed missing. Dan praises his wife for catching the criminals before him. Barbara, on her part, is just swooning over her husband's heroics, saying, quote, I felt a lot better when I saw him with the shillelagh because he was chasing them out of the house. Dan said he hadn't been to seriously hurt the criminals, but the situation sort of forced his hand, saying, quote, hopefully they got nothing more than a headache, and hopefully they'll pursue another occupation. If nothing else, at least the burglars learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate an elderly person holding a whack-worthy stick.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
Yeah, that's the truth.
I just loved it. I just got this 81-year-old former Marine bashing these young guys over the head, just knocking them sideways. And they're just like in shock, just trying to run away. And then he runs out there barefoot beating on the car. That is awesome.
That really is. That is absolutely amazing.
So I want to, when I'm 81, I want to be able to do that.
And you want the opportunity.
You know what? Part of me does. Oh, Martha, here it goes. We got some people thinking they're going to break in.
Well, it's like my dad, 24 and a half years as an FBI agent. And he said that he always wanted to walk in on an armed robbery somewhere, like a gas station or whatever, and, get the jump on these guys. And then 2 weeks after he retired, my brother walked in on an armed robbery at a Texaco station.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. As he's walking in, the guys are running out the other door. So, one of your kids will get that opportunity to beat the crap out of somebody with a stick, but you'll just have to stand and watch.
All right. Well, as we move into our final segment, let's get to some entertainment. What are we watching? What are we reading? What are we listening to? And Walt, I'll go to you first, and let's hit the watching. I think you and I will probably share another episode of The Mandalorian in today's episode.
Oh my gosh. That show is amazing. It gets better every single week.
Oh, sorry. You heard I went to pick up my mouse and it fell out of my hand.
I can understand that problem. Do you want me to start that over?
No. I can edit around it.
Okay.
Now, you know that episode was directed by Carl Weathers, right?
I did. I realized that. Of course, at the end, it said directed by Carl Weathers. And I've always loved him as an actor. He is really great. And, obviously the Rocky movies, but he was on Arrested Development. He played himself. And if you've never seen, I think it was in season 2, he really makes fun of himself. And he does a great acting job there. But his role on The Mandalorian is fantastic. And that whole episode, it was off the chain the whole time. Edge of your seat. It's what Star Wars should be.
Well, did you catch the little error that was left in from the edit when Carl Weathers' character was firing a gun, and in the hallway behind him, you can see one of the folks working on the set half on and half out of the frame?
Yep, one of the crew members.
Yep.
And I'll have to go back and rewatch that episode. I can't remember if that was a scene they could have cut or whatever, but I guess they just missed that in editing.
Hey, it's amazing. You get so focused on making things work and you're paying attention to the lead actors, you sometimes miss those details. There is a fantastic moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And once you see it, you will never again unsee it. But the scene right after Indy thinks Marion's been killed in the truck and he's sitting in the bar drinking his sorrows away with the monkey.
Oh, yeah.
In the background, where you see all of these people, all these extras all dressed up, someone walks through on the edge of the screen in t-shirt and jeans, going to get ready, didn't realize the camera was rolling, and just just walks all the way.
That is hilarious.
I have seen that movie probably 50 or 60 times, and until somebody pointed it out to me, had never noticed.
I haven't either. I'll have to go back and look at that tonight.
Just YouTube, just that one scene, you'll never miss it. And when we had a chance to get back to the movie theater early this year, when they started opening back up, one of the ones I got to see back in the theater was Raiders. And on the big screen, there is no way you can miss this Joker walking up the set in his jeans and a t-shirt.
That is hysterical. That is really funny, especially in a movie like that. They go over and over and over the cuts. That's really funny.
And sometimes, and I've been on this side of the editing side, you realize I only have one really, really good take that I want to use, and I'm going to have no choice and just hope the audience accepts the fact that there's a mistake like that in the background. And a lot of times they're fun to find.
Yeah, they are. And I remember when I was on the set, they were really meticulous about everything. How many buttons you've got buttoned on your jacket, where your bag is. Everything is a big deal on the set like that. So it is funny when they miss something like that.
So besides Mandalorian, what else you been watching this week?
Well, I got hooked into the Enterprise a couple weeks ago. I know I've mentioned that before. I'm in season 3, getting close to halfway through. So I'll probably wrap that up here in the next couple days. Looking back, I remember probably why it didn't make it past season 3. 3 is definitely the weakest, even though it's good and it still has a lot of really good Star Trek moments to it. It isn't as great as season 1 and 2, but it's still a great show. It's worth watching. If you're a Star Trek fan, particularly, I highly encourage you to go and watch that. It's on Netflix. So catch up on that. The acting is really good, and the story line is really fantastic. They get a little bit lost in the weeds a couple of times, but overall, it's really good. I like it. I like season 3 of season 3 of Enterprise a lot more than I liked the last couple of seasons of Voyager. So, for whatever that's worth. And then the other thing, I just kind of got hooked on some war movies. I've watched a couple of war movies this week. I'd watched A Bridge Too Far. and The Big Red One, and a couple others. So I don't know what got me down that path, but all of a sudden I'm watching World War II movies again. So um, who knows? But as far as those old war movies go, if you've never watched The Big Red One, I definitely encourage you to check that out. A Bridge Too Far, Midway is one of the great ones.
But didn't you say the remake that just came out last year was really good?
I'll tell you, as far as remakes go, best remake I've ever seen. And as a standalone movie, that Midway is amazing. The cinematography is just phenomenal. I ended up going by myself to watch it, and it was a packed house. But I wanted to see it in the theater because of the flying and action scenes. And there are a couple of times that you feel like you're in the pilot's seat. When they push over and they're going on these bombing runs, it's almost like, oh crap, I'm not going to make it. And it really is. It's definitely in my top 10 now of war movies.
Excellent. Oh, I have to catch up the new one. I have not yet seen it. So, all right. Well, for me, there's only one new one. We've already talked about The Mandalorian. I'm nearly done with Star Trek: The Next Generation. I am midway through season 7. But thanks to our friends over at the 60MW podcast, they have a show where they're looking at not just old movies, but they also are doing a side kind of episodes where they're looking at an old television show. And I had remembered seeing the advertisement for Sledgehammer, but I never watched a single episode.
Oh, yeah. Great show.
So it's available on YouTube. You can just search for it. And I have been going through and enjoying sort of that airplane style of humor where the main character is obviously a kind of takeoff of Dirty Harry, and the typical screaming cop and just the relationships. But so far, I'm really enjoying how silly and 80s it all is.
Yeah, I had kind of forgotten about that show until y'all mentioned it the other day, and it was a great show. And so I'm glad y'all are revisiting that.
Well, it's fun to just go back and watch a show like that you missed when it aired. And now with all the tools and all the streaming, it's very easy to go back and binge some of those.
Yeah, and are y'all breaking it down like show by show, or are you just talking about the show in general?
Well, I'm not. I was just listening to the episodes. It's Chris Jellyman and Adam Perry, who are part of the 60MW crew. And so when those episodes drop, I love to listen to the two of them talking about classic movies when they were kids. Do they still hold up as adults? And now they're adding classic television shows they watched, and do they still hold up? Okay,
I'll have to make sure I listen to those.
Yeah, they're called Spotlight Reflection. They're like they put something in the spotlight and reflect. Is this really kind of like with me in the movie Willow? When I was a younger kid, I thought Willow was a great movie, and then I showed it to my kids, and they laughed at it, and I'll never watch it again.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was Time Bandits I did that with.
I love Time Bandits.
Yeah, and then I watched it again with them, and they were like, oh, this is terrible.
They just didn't get it.
They didn't get it.
All right. We skipped it last week, so I don't know if there's anything new, but we will do the reading segment, and if not, I'll just cut it out. You reading anything?
Yeah, actually, this is relevant to our guest coming up next week, so I'll go ahead and plug that. I had just got on Amazon or on my Kindle. It's also available in hard copy and paperback. It's called Somewhere You Feel Free, Tom Petty and Los Angeles. And it's by Chris McKittrick, who's going to be our guest next week. And Chris has written 2 books that kind of in the same genre. This book on Tom Petty, and it's Tom's life and career from the time he got to LA until the end of his life. And then he's written another one on the Rolling Stones in New York City, and basically how their career changed, grew, whatever. And I guess how their lives grew once they made the move from Europe, from England to New York City. So I'm probably a quarter of the way through that book. Somewhere You Feel Free, about the Tom Petty and LA story. And it is really good. Chris is a great writer. It's a compelling story, and I'm really looking forward to digging through the rest of this. So kind of a plug for next week and a plug for his book. But if you want to check that out, fantastic book.
Excellent. Well, I haven't read anything, so we'll move right into what are you listening to?
If you're from Atlanta and you know anything about sports, you probably know who Pete Davis is. Pete has been on a number of stations here over the years, and he has a great podcast called Holy Crap, It's Sports. And Pete has a unique take on sports that I really appreciate. He is not afraid to say, hey, the Braves are stupid for doing this, or the Falcons are, brilliant for doing that. He really calls it like he sees it, and he's very entertaining. He's got a real great manner about him. So that's Holy Crap, It's Sports with Pete Davis. And if you're looking for it, it is the one with the bucket full of like a baseball bat, tennis racket, wiffle ball bat, like you'd find in your own closet. Second, I want to plug, and I'm also listening to some of the episodes of the Dirty Harry Minute. Those guys just asked you and I to read some fan fiction for them because they were looking for American voices to do that. So we had done several pages of dialogue for them this last week, and that's coming out here pretty shortly. I'm not sure. Sometime it'll probably be out by the time this episode drops. And then if you've never listened to the podcast, How Did This Get Made? It was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to, and it is really, really great. Jason Mantzoukas, a couple other folks, and they just go and break down a movie. They take a movie every other week and go through and talk about how good or bad it is. They talk about some of the best scenes, some of the worst scenes, the good acting, bad acting, and all three of the main hosts are actors and writers. So it gives a really good perspective. But then also they go through some of these just terrible movies, like Stardust was one of the ones that they did.
How in the world did they put Sean Connery in latex straps?
That was one of the long conversations in that. Is like, how did that happen? And how terrible is that? So you definitely want to check that out if you never have before. It's kind of addictive, but it is really good. And it is definitely not safe for work. Put your headphones in. Jason Mantzoukas, if you know who he is, will, I was going to say occasionally, regularly and randomly drop the F-bomb. So just be careful with that around your kids or coworkers. But How Did This Get Made is definitely worth checking out.
Well, I wrote this down. Randy wasn't going to be able to hang out till the end, but let's just remind everybody that he was in a recent episode of the Great Trials podcast. So any attorneys out there, if you're a wannabe attorney, or if you're maybe in school or thinking about going back to school and you want a podcast that gets into the minutia of what it is to be a lawyer and be involved in a large personal injury case, especially against a massive, I guess a massive company like Suzuki, the Great Trials, check out that episode with Randy Edwards, who was with us today. For me, okay.
No, I was just going to say that I think one thing, Randy mentioned about that, that podcast is that it is kind of geared to lawyers. I would encourage everybody to at least go listen to an episode of that, though, because I get a lot of questions about shouldn't things work this way or shouldn't this happen? Well, once you kind of start to hear how their world works, I think it'll make a whole lot more sense to you. It took me a while working in the business to really get a grasp on it, but I think that would be a good episode for everybody to listen to.
And for me, I've got my run of staples that I want to go through. These are all the shout outs to podcasts that I know support us. And so I want to support them. I know, Walt, you follow almost all of these as well. I already mentioned before the 60MW folks, the 60MW podcast from across the way, the Real Queens of Queens, the Bad Cop show. Our good buddy BK takes his Saturday show, exports it, adds some flavor, and calls it the BK on the Air Escape Pod podcast. You've got the Golden Rage of TV, which is on YouTube, because you get to watch a lot of the slides and images and pictures of these little mini documentaries he does in a minute and a half to sometimes 2 minutes on classic actors and moments of television, which is really, really cool. The Marine Corps Movie Minute, where Walt and I actually had some of the last minutes of that movie. Geek to Me Radio, the ABC's, the ABCDTOS for you classic Star Trek fans, is a group of Trekkers that are going through all of the classic episodes, but in alphabetical order. So you're going to jump all over the place. You've got the Rocky podcast, Going the Distance, which is the other one by our good buddy Ryan Rabalkin, who'll be joining us in a couple of weeks. Also with Ryan, the Worst of the Best podcast. The Slycast, which is a Stallone-based podcast that has other Stallone casts coming together as one. So we got to mention our good friends Doug and Jason with the Rocky Minute, our good friend Tim Andrews with Radio Labyrinth, and then a couple more. I want to always do a quick shout out to the Indiana Jones Minute. Those guys were one of the first groups to do a movies by minute. and have been with us in seasons 1 and 2. We even had Tom Taylor join us here in season 3 as a guest. Always great to have those guys out there and support us. And that pretty much runs all the ones that I've got.
Well, there's one other thing I wanted to plug, and I know you're going to laugh at this, but every Saturday morning, I actually do listen to your radio show and BK on the air. And I wanted to plug your Saturday show for a reason, and that is you have some of the greatest guests. And you know, we kind of joke about this, but you do a great job interviewing them because you let them talk about whatever it is their topic is. And you have people from a local doctor who has been a guest on our podcast. You have had you have a lady who comes in and just talks about like cooking for the holidays and stuff like that. Real estate agents. You have a parade of really interesting people who come through your show. And I find it interesting every week. So it's WBHF Hometown Radio. You can find it on TuneIn. And you are on from 7 to 10.
Every Saturday. Yep.
Every Saturday.
Eastern time.
Eastern time. Yeah. 7:10 Eastern. So you may have to get up early or record it. You actually, if you have the TuneIn, whatever the TuneIn pay thing is, like $5 a month, you can record them and then listen to them later. And then that's followed by BK on the air. And of course, BK has been a guest on our show several times this season and the last two. Good friend of our show, and he and Alan hang out. And every once in a while, I'll show up on there. But really a fun, just nerd show. A lot of geeky, what does he call it? Retro geekiness?
Yeah, nostalgic geekiness.
Nostalgic geekiness. And he also has a podcast on Anchor. So that is the BK.
Yeah, I mentioned it. The BK on the Air Escape Pod podcast.
Escape Pod. Yeah. So check that out. If you're around Saturdays, go on TuneIn Radio, find WBHF Hometown Radio, and it's definitely an entertaining morning for you.
Well, I appreciate that. And then I really do. I feel humbled every time somebody reaches out and says, "Oh, I was listening," because, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask somebody to just give up time and pay attention to what you have to say. So I really appreciate it.
Well, and I say this all sincerity, and you know me, I don't do that very often, but you really do a great job of bringing in people who are interesting and focusing them on some topic that I always like. You know, you were talking one Saturday about canning fruit, and I was like, this is going to be terrible. And I ended up listening to the whole thing. I was like, I had no idea that's how you can fruit. Like, it was really interesting. And that's unusual. I mean, usually it's stuff that is really relevant. You know, Dr. Ryan has some incredible, good medical advice and things like that. So definitely worth checking out.
I appreciate it. All right. Well, if people want to learn a little bit more about us, read our bios, learn how to get in touch with us, and maybe go back and binge earlier episodes because they just stumbled across us today, how can they learn more about The Wilder Ride?
The best place to learn about The Wilder Ride is at www.thewilderride.com. That is our website, and it has all of our information there, including how you can find us around the web. So you can also check us out over on Facebook at facebook.com/thewilderride. Follow us there, and then join our listeners group. And the listeners group, as we say every week, there's no politics, no religion, no other stuff like that. It's all entertainment, stuff about the show. We've had some politics pop in from time to time. We've had to kind of push out the door, but it is a great group of people. We have all kinds of fun stuff that goes up on that page. So if you just want an escape from the world for a little while, check that out, and you will really enjoy hanging out there.
And come on back next week. We are getting close to the end of not just the year, but the end of season 3. We will be taking a couple of weeks off to spend time with friends and family, but we encourage you to go back, if you just discovered us, to binge some of our earlier episodes this 3rd season where we turned it into a guest talk show. Go back and check out seasons 1 and 2, but certainly bookmark us, subscribe. Don't forget to rate and review us. That's always fun. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything but a few minutes of your time. And be here next Tuesday for a brand new edition of the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. I kept thinking we would have shorter episodes now.
I had just looked down at the time. I cannot believe that. So.
Well, part of it is we were filling the gap when you had, gotten dropped.
Yeah, I still have no idea. I'm streaming this through my phone at this point.
But Well, I thought that was cool. I loved hearing the guy that goes from, football player to corporate law, taking on some of the biggest, firms that have their own in-house attorneys. That's just really cool. That was neat to meet that guy.
Randy's a great guy. He really is. And I guess our first NFL player.
First NFL player.
Hey!